What's up everyone, BucklingOne here and welcome to another video on the Battlefield 6 beta. Just like that, Battlefield 6 beta is over, but the soul of the series is still in question. In this video, I'll break down the beta's highs and lows and what DICE needs to fix before launch. We've analysed the gunplay, debated the weapons and class systems, and explored everything the beta had to offer. So now that the dust has settled, it's time for a final verdict. Was this beta a success? Was it a true Battlefield experience or just another COD style grind? And what did it tell us about the state of Battlefield in 2025? Well, after that first beta weekend, like many of you, I had a pretty good feeling overall. After 2 full weekends, what's the final verdict? In my opinion, despite some very clear issues, the answer is a resounding yes. This beta was a success. It proved that the magic, the core DNA of what makes Battlefield special, is still there. But is this the successor we've been waiting a long time for, or are we heading down a path of complete change? Let's break it down. Before we get into it though, I do want to tell you a little bit about my history with Battlefield. I started with Battlefield 2 and I loved that game so much that I used to pay to go and play it in internet cafes, as I didn't have my own PC back then. After that I fell in love with Battlefield 3 on Xbox, but I spent the better time of the last decade in the world of Battlefield 4. That game was my home. I thoroughly enjoyed Hardline as a concept as well, but not as a Battlefield. It felt like a spin-off and not something that's part of the main series. Battlefield 1 and 5 didn't really draw me in as much, the World War settings just didn't really click with me. As for Battlefield 2042, well, I enjoyed it, but there were too many changes that made it feel different to a true Battlefield experience. I still put many hours into the game, but I feel like it's time for something new. So, if I had to give the beta a final score, not as a full game, but as a beta experience, well, I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10. I was genuinely surprised at how stable it was for the most part. The graphics are on point, the audio is, as we've discussed, absolutely fantastic, and the overall gameplay just feels good. The reason it's not a perfect 10 is down to some things we'd expect from a beta. There are definitely weapon balancing issues that need to be addressed. Shotguns are crazy powerful right now and SMGs are outperforming assault rifles at medium to longer ranges. And of course there were some minor bugs, but that's to be expected. For me, the single best part of the beta was the gunplay. Once I was able to dial in my preferred sensitivity and settings, it just felt incredibly solid and tight. I also genuinely enjoyed playing when I was with a capable squad. I've said it before as well, but the ability to drag down teammates to safety before reviving them is amazing. On the flip side, the worst part for me was, without a doubt, the maps. They just feel too small. They don't have that traditional large-scale Battlefield feeling. This has a huge impact on the game's pace. It feels like there's no breathing room, just 2 teams constantly clashing into each other non-stop, instead of those classic moments of tactical movement and repositioning. This was true on Conquest, and it was especially noticeable in modes like Rush and Breakthrough, where the objective placement definitely needs to be tuned a bit more. I personally have never been a fan of infantry only meat grinder maps, and I still don't have a lot of fondness for the 2 most notorious ones, Operation Metro and Operation Locker. These are fan favourites though, and I get that, but I just don't see any of the beta maps coming close to them. Criticism from the community about the map design is unfortunately very valid. It is great that DICE have confirmed bigger maps are coming, and the confirmation of maps Mirak Valley, which is supposedly the largest map at launch, and Operation Firestorm are promising, especially with Firestorm being one of my all-time favourites. Right now though, my biggest fear is that the core map design philosophy is flawed, and that the bigger maps will just be wide open fields and not the complex multi-layered sandboxes that we loved. Of the 9 new maps that are confirmed, 2 are infantry only, Empire State and Saints Quarter. Iberian Offensive, Siege of Cairo and Liberation Peak are on the medium side of map size in my opinion, so that leaves New Subic City and Manhattan Bridge along with Mirak Valley to be the larger maps, and we still don't know anything about them. Looking at community feedback online, a lot of players have been talking about other issues. I saw a lot of talk about the netcode, and I definitely experienced that too. Moments where your bullets don't seem to register or you feel like you've just been insta-killed. And as for splash damage from explosives, well, let's just say I've seen RPGs literally explode right beside an enemy and they just brush it off like it's nothing. And of course, the big one, the class system and the open versus closed weapons debate. I personally prefer the way it used to be in Battlefield 3 and 4, where weapons were locked with your class, but you had those unlockable all-class weapons like DMRs or carbines that gave you some flexibility. That to me was the perfect balance. The classes are finally back to something that feels like Battlefield, but I think further adjustments can be made to really get back to that Battlefield formula. Now, for vehicles, well, I mostly played Rush and Breakthrough, so I can't really comment on how the helicopters and jets felt. I can say that I did try and fly a helicopter one time, and even though I had changed my control scheme to use the triggers as throttle, it still defaulted to the left stick. Also, I couldn't pitch up or down with the right stick. I'm thinking this was a bug, but that's the one and only time I even attempted anything airborne. Regarding the tanks, well, I'm not a fan of the sluggish turret movement. The controls feel laggy, like there's a significant delay between your input and the response of the turret's movement. It might be a smart choice for balance to cap the turret's rotation speed, but I found it frustrating in 2042 and it's just as annoying now. I prefer a more straightforward limit on rotation speed instead of this constant lag in response. On the whole, and as we've talked about in my previous videos, the tanks seem less powerful. Their restricted movement is a massive downside. This is especially obvious when trying to navigate around a lot of map clutter, and the movement just feels quite clunky and unresponsive. I'm not asking for insanely unrealistic levels of handling, but it would be nice to go back to how the tanks felt in Battlefield 4. However, there is a silver lining. It does promote a certain sense of teamwork, especially if you have the right team or squad. You really need and depend on engineers to keep you repaired, and a lone tank can't dominate an objective anymore. It pushes you toward better team and squad play, and I definitely can appreciate that. If you're still here, leave me a comment below to let me know you're watching. Just say something like "Justice for tanks" and I'll know straight away. The beta was a great sign overall, but a beta is just a promise, it's not a finished product. And now the pressure is on DICE to deliver at launch. This brings us to my expectations for the full release. I've been thinking about this a lot and I've boiled it down to a must-fix list of 3 things that I believe DICE absolutely has to get right for this game to be a success. First on my list is a complete weapon and class rebalance. They need to make sure each weapon class can sit comfortably in its designated range. We absolutely can't have SMGs outperforming assault rifles at medium to long ranges. And speaking of which, I really think the support class needs to be given SMGs by default. They're supposed to be on the front line, right in the action, and trying to outgun people in close quarters with a slow and cumbersome LMG is just not ideal. Giving support players access to SMGs would make that role so much more effective and make them so much more mobile. Secondly, objective placement needs a serious overhaul, especially in Rush. It really feels like they shoehorn the mode into these maps without fully thinking it through. Some objectives are insanely hard for the attackers to even get close to, while others are far too easy, and I think the Siege of Cairo map is a perfect example of this imbalance. Lastly, my third must fix. The netcode has to be rock solid for release. A lot is riding on this game for DICE and for the franchise as a whole. They need to get off on the best possible foot to gain and keep momentum, especially with Black Ops 7 releasing in November. While it's not a direct competitor, comparisons will always be drawn, and a smooth launch has to be non-negotiable. Let me know which fix is most important to you. Is it weapon balance, objectives, or netcode? What do you think? Beyond these fixes, let's talk about my big hope for the full game. And for me, as I mentioned earlier, it's definitely bigger maps. I think we all felt that classic massive scale Battlefield feeling was missing, and that comes from having huge maps with plenty of action spread throughout. I would love to see some maps that play like Zavod 311 or Strike at Karkand, or even a remaster of these maps. We are getting Firestorm, and we've already had some classic maps in 2042, No Shar Canals, Caspian Border and Arica Harbour to name a few. Here's hoping that we see these again at some point. I'm also really keen to see what they do with Portal. They've said we'll be able to make our own custom experiences with, in their own words, user-generated content. What that actually looks like remains to be seen, but the potential is huge. And yes, a server browser would be nice, but it's basically being confirmed to be a Portal-only feature. Lastly, I have high hopes for the campaign. I know it's not really talked about as much and it's not a priority for most, but I have some very fond memories of the Battlefield campaigns. It was sorely missed in 2042 and I actually think it's criminal that it wasn't included. I'm glad that they've recognised this and I am hopeful that the story in Battlefield 6 will be up there with the best. DICE have always been great at telling compelling stories that draw you in, so fingers crossed for more of that this year, especially as an alternative and change of pace from multiplayer. With all that being said, do I think the game is pre-order worthy? Nope, absolutely not. We as a community have been burned way too many times by pre-orders, and we need to send a message to these companies that the model is not the way forward. I am firmly on the side of the no pre-order campaign. Let's wait for the reviews, wait for the final release gameplay, and make an informed decision then. Do not give them your money based on a promise. Finally, let's zoom out and look at the big picture. This beta wasn't just a test for a new game, it felt like a test for the very soul of the Battlefield franchise after the rocky launch of 2042. So where does Battlefield go from here? On the identity crisis, I think this beta shows a definite return to form, especially compared to 2042. They are on the right track, but they still need to fully recapture that special Battlefield magic that's been missing. They absolutely need to stop trying to be Call of Duty and remember what this franchise is and what the fans truly care about. Overall, I am cautiously optimistic. Speaking of Call of Duty, well, that brings us to the Call of Duty question in comparison. The smaller maps in the beta have definitely fueled this concern, but it goes a bit deeper. There have been rumours online, along with some alleged quotes from the general manager of Battlefield, whose name is Byron Bede. Well, he is a former COD executive, and the rumours are that they want to turn Battlefield into an annual franchise in a few years' time. This tactic has already led to the decline of COD, with many players feeling fatigued by the yearly releases and the drop in overall quality. I absolutely do not want to see the same thing happen to Battlefield. If this game is made well and it resonates with us, the fans, then we will happily play it for years to come. However, we have to understand that EA are notoriously money hungry, and they will take every opportunity to milk as much money from their fan base as possible. It's a very fine line to be walking. In conclusion, I think Battlefield 6 has the potential to compete with Battlefield 4, but only if we get proper classic style maps. The foundation is solid, but the house they build on it needs to be a classic Battlefield, not a trendy first-person shooter designed to appeal to everyone. If they can deliver on the promise of bigger, better maps and listen to the detailed feedback from the veteran community, this could be an instant classic, but if not, I'm afraid we'll be having this exact same conversation all over again in a few years' time. 5 years from now, I hope to be looking back fondly on Battlefield 6 and possibly still playing it, while looking forward to the next game after a healthy 5-year cycle. I feel like it can be a great baseline to re-establish the series as a top contender in the genre. Ultimately, the Battlefield 6 beta has left me feeling more optimistic about this series than I have in years. It's not perfect, but the foundation is incredibly strong. That's why I gave it an 8 out of 10. Now the ball is in DICE's court. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What did you think of the beta? What are your biggest hopes for the full release? If you like this deep dive, make sure to hit the like button, and also make sure to share it with your squad and click the notification bell so you never miss a Battlefield breakdown. This has been BucklingOne, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the battlefield, and I'll see you in my next video.